say.
All righty. Can you tell us, General Malin, the most interesting day that you had in the military?
Well, I think for most of us in the country, and particularly those of us in the military, I would go back to 9/11. In my particular situation, at that point in time, I was the commander of the 916th Air Refueling Wing in North Carolina, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. That particular morning, I was in a staff meeting, and the phone rang, and our public affairs officer called and said, "Sir, I think you should look at the TV." Went over and turned on the TV for the staff, and we saw the first images were of the first Trade Center on fire. You could tell something had happened, not sure exactly what at that point. But we immediately stopped the staff meeting, and I went to our command post, which is where we handle all of our classified information and, of course, monitor all of our flight operations. And turn on the TV, and as we were getting started, I asked what we had in terms of flying operations that day. And we had 2 airplanes on the ramp at that point in time, just getting ready to start engines to go for a training mission. Now, the air refueling mission that we did is to go up and transfer fuel to other airplanes in flight. So, knowing how things go, knowing how things were, I immediately said, just ask them to stop what they're doing, get the airplanes ready to start engines, but don't go anyplace. Keep your flight plan open, and we'll see what's evolving, what's going on. Immediately after that, of course, then we were sitting there watching the network broadcast, and actually saw the second airplane impact the second tower. Immediately, everybody in the room kind of looked at each other and went, knew what we were looking at, because it was obvious to us this was live footage, and this is something that had just happened right before our eyes. So at that point, I went out to the airplanes that we had on the ramp and the crews, who, of course, are unaware of what's going on. All they knew was we had asked them not to take off. And went out and sat down and talked to both crews and said, explained what we had seen, explained that we had seen some large airplanes that had impacted the World Trade Center. Things were very confused, things were happening really fast, but it was obvious that something was going on. And as I told them, this is going somewhere, I'm just not sure exactly where. But since we all know nothing happens without air refueling capability, be ready to start engines, we'll let you know what we might need. Went back in, and no sooner got into the command post and the phone started ringing from the Tactical Air Control Center in Illinois, asking if we had any air refueling airplanes that could provide refueling in a relatively short amount of time. So we were fortunate enough to be able to say we had 2 airplanes that could take off within 10 minutes and be anywhere on the East Coast if they needed us, and just let us know. Following that phone call, as I recall the events, is when the FAA started grounding all the airplanes around the country. And as soon as they had everybody on the ground, we got another call that said, we need one of your airplanes to do refuelings for the fighters that are flying over Washington, D.C. and New York City. We're not sure where just yet, but can you take off and head in that direction? And so we had one of the crews take off. Fortunate enough to have them ready to go, because they were able to refuel the fighters that were doing the air defense mission at that point. Of course, as we all now know, they had an impact at the Pentagon and then the events in Pennsylvania. And the ability to do that air refueling kept the fighters in the air and gave a much better sense of security and a much better picture of what was really going on. But when that crew came back, it turned out that they had been taken all the way up to New York City to refuel fighters there, and they were one of the first airplanes, if not the first, to actually fly over the site of the World Trade Center. And they came back, and I don't think they blinked for 30 minutes when they got on the ground. They just said, you can't imagine what it looks like. It was just unbelievable. And having that opportunity to be there and to actually have an impact for them was just, I'm sure if you sat down and talked to any one of those people, they would tell you that was the most intense and rewarding day of their life. Of course, as the week went on, we were continually asked to do other things. We had the opportunity to fly many of the congressional members back to their home constituents so that they could talk about events and reassure the people back home. But what made it so rewarding, and I told members of our wing as they were getting ready to deploy, at that moment in time, if we all go back, we can think about what we felt like in those days following the events 9/11, and the frustration that so many people in America had about what had happened, and the simple helplessness of not having anything that they personally could do about it. That was the honor and the privilege that we had there at the 916th and in the military as a whole, to have the opportunity to actually do something about it and to respond. And as I told the people that called that first day, we're here to do what you asked us to do. And we kept reminding our folks, and we've reminded them every day since then.
Thank you. That's an awesome story.